Hello my lovelies, with spring just around the corner, it's time to make some fun spring history bounding pieces for my capsule wardrobe. I just cleaned up my studio and it's ready to go. Like many of you, I've only recently discovered this history bounding community. I've been involved with the medieval reenactment world for a couple of decades now. The clothes are amazingly comfortable and the linens and the woolens are just so yummy. So what the hell, let's bring what we most love from our obsession with historical dress into our modern dress. It's another way we can continue our lifelong love of learning. If you're new here, my name is Althea and I'm here to talk about sewing, courage, creativity, all things history bounding. Today I'm sharing with you my process for planning, designing, and getting ready to sew a few new pieces for my history bound wardrobe. This year I hope to be able to sew more than I did last year. We'll see if I can accomplish that. It could happen. It could happen. I asked my YouTube community to choose which century to use as my starting point for a new spring capsule wardrobe. You all chose the 17th century. And that was interesting because I'm not really familiar with that period of history's clothing, so it was a fun rabbit hole. I will have to design the collection so that it can blend and work with the other pieces that I already have. And that's the fun of history bounding, really. There are no rules. You can mix and match eras with the same manic delight as if you were mixing Chanel and Westwood. And if someone is telling you there are rules, you just look them dead in the eye and say, I don't think so. So, what did happen in the 1600s? The 17th century starts in the Renaissance and ends in early modern history. So much of our modern cultural, social, geopolitical, and systemic and justice structures were solidifying during this period. It's a century of colonization, annexation, and conquest. The first enslaved peoples of the transatlantic slave trade were brought to the American colonies in 1619 when Virginian colonists bought 20 enslaved people to work the tobacco fields. Jamestown, Charleston, Quebec, and other cities were being founded on native lands. Outside of the Western cultural sphere, countries that hadn't been colonized were flourishing. The Edo period in Japan and the Qing dynasty in China were just beginning, and they will last centuries. The 17th centuries also saw the first inklings of a developing scientific tradition, although not without interference by religious authorities. Galileo publishes his idea about the universe, and the church gets mighty cranky, which made Galileo recant. In a wonderful example of how Mother Nature influences society, the Maunder Minimum, a period of low solar energy, causes a mini ice age. This causes food scarcity worldwide, but hey, folks could ice skate on many rivers across Europe. During this period, political influence and strife was a near constant in Europe. England has a civil war when a bunch of Puritans behead the king. They muck about until the people restore the monarchy, after Cromwell has the good grace to sod off and die. Some of these wars were based in the schism between Catholicism and Protestantism, or to just establish hegemony over the newly conquered and colonized non-Western people in order to control the natural wealth of those lands. England's Parliament passes the Habeas Corpus Act against abusive detentions and detentions without legal authority. This concept would find its way into American jurisprudence and the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. Isaac Newton presents his Principia to the Royal Society. He's replacing the magic of the gods with the understanding of natural phenomena, paving the way for the development of scientific method and ways of knowing. The church is less cranky with Newton, so timing is everything, I guess. The philosopher John Locke rejects church authority in matters of philosophy and science. His ideas would become part of the American Constitution and then be ignored by Christian nationalists in the early 21st century. Of course, there was also Thomas Hobbes, but, F that guy. In 1600, between 540 to 580 million people lived on Earth. By 1700, the number is roughly between 600 and 680 million. So the 17th century opens with Queen Elizabeth and ends with Louis XIV, the Sun King. It begins with Shakespeare and it ends with Locke. When it comes to dress, in Europe, the Elizabethan era saw a very conical torso shape with wide panniered skirts, all the pearls, and impressive pleated collars, and the non-riches wear all the beautiful wools. When Charles II was restored to the throne of England, Cavalier clothing quickly replaced the dour, puritanical clothing of Cromwell's reign. Basically, Cavalier was all about the lace. More lace, Yes, let's add more lace. I said more lace. In France at the end of the century, Louis XIV revolutionizes fashion. Still conical body torso shape, but the masses moved to the back and gone a little bit higher with gravity-defying wigs and headdresses. And Louis builds Versailles to show off his gorgeous calves and legs. Things were changing outside of Europe too. In China, the Qing dynasty replaced the Ming dynasty, and there was a sharp change in dress. Dress becomes very highly regimented and controlled according to a person's station and occupation. The Manchu hairstyle of the long braid is introduced, replacing the man bun of the Ming dynasty. In Japan, the Edo period lasted from 1603 to 1868, and statuses defined really what could be worn, much like in China. There were the aristocrats, there were the daimyo or the warlords, and then there was the townsfolk. The male and female rulers drew from Chinese style, otherwise people wore multiple layers of robes tied with sashes or obi. If you want to learn more about the history of clothing in China and Korea, check out the 2 channels in the description below. I highly recommend both. And if you know of any other channel that looks into historical non-Western clothing, please share in the comments. I'd really like to learn more. So there you have a very quick and very superficial rundown of the 17th century. So let's jump into making that 17th century inspired history-bound capsule wardrobe for my spring wearing. What time period and culture is your favorite? I mean, can you even really pick a favorite? I know I can't. So what is a capsule wardrobe? It's a limited number of garments that complement each other to create different outfits. You know, tops and bottoms, they all go together. It's the wonderful thing about capsule wardrobes is that they really make you think about the clothes you wear. Each purchase or sewing project needs to fit into the whole look. It helps to ease decision fatigue by making it easier to make clothing choices in the morning because everything goes with everything. In the early to mid 20th century, people owned less clothing. Well, anytime before now, they own less clothing than we do. Closets were much smaller, even if they existed in a bedroom. Often a movable wardrobe or chest, basically and essentially a portable closet, was all the space that was available for clothing storage. People bought or made clothing that they expected to last many years. The consumable and wasteful fast fashions weren't really a thing back then. The phrase capsule wardrobe was popularized in the 1980s by Susie Faux at her boutique Wardrobe in London. Faux wanted to provide easy professional styles to the women who were starting to join the workforce in larger numbers during the 1980s. Some of you watching this may remember this, or for younger folks, this is when your mothers and grandmothers were first entering the workforce. I remember reading books on executive style and how to dress professionally that were popular at the time. Check out the movie 9 to 5 for an idea of the zeitgeist of the time, and you get Dolly, Jane, and Lily in their prime. And shoulder pads. Don't forget the shoulder pads in the 1980s. For this round of designs for my capsule wardrobe, I want to make a kind of a double history bounding by using Donna Karan's 1980s capsule wardrobe collection 7 Easy Pieces as a starting point. So what are the 7 easy pieces? There is a versatile skirt, a pair of loose trousers, a tailored jacket, a cashmere sweater, a white shirt, a bodysuit, and a scarf. I generally start with thinking about what kind of clothes I like to wear, and for me, clothes can't be too terribly fussy for everyday wear, and to be honest, my daily uniform is a mid-thigh knit tunic and leggings, or a sweatshirt and joggers. I pretty much schlep around in super comfy clothes. But what I'm trying to do is find ways to bring more historical elements into my daily schlepping wardrobe, but keep them comfy and easy to wear. Otherwise, they'll look fantastic in my closets, but they will never get worn. I almost always start with the board on Pinterest and finding images from museum collections. This helps me focus on the common design elements that emerge from the historical clothing that I liked well enough to pin. This part of the process can take some time, and I have many boards for future projects that I may or may not make. I like the freedom to just pull from so many different sources at this point and not really make any design decisions. Your process might be different, as some people like to make notebooks or journals with printed images. You do you. Looking to the items on Karan's list, I plan to take some creative license. I don't wear skirts on account of me being quite apple-shaped, and skirts just end up wedged underneath my boobs, so that's not really an elegant look that I'm going for. So the skirt will become a knee-length dress that can be worn with leggings or pants. I also abhor the thought of a bodysuit. No thank you, 1980s. I am still dealing with the trauma of wearing them back then. But we can look to the purpose of the bodysuit, which was to provide a base layer that can be tucked into a waistband. I can easily adapt this to a garment for being worn next to the skin underneath a shirt, a sweater, or a jacket. I might even make an additional small t-shirt-ish thing to go under the tanky top garment to help me keep it clean. Her cashmere sweater was a simple garment, so I will need to find a design that captures the purpose of the garment to be layered and to provide comfortable warmth without really being bulky. Then I fell down the rabbit hole that is 17th century knitted waistcoats. I had no idea that these amazing garments existed, so thank you everyone who voted for the 17th century. These garments were worn as informal wear at home. In the limited time I had to research them, I couldn't find any paintings or prints that showed them being worn. They appear mostly to be made of silk and had really lovely designs and textures knitted into the garment. If any of you knitters out there need a new project, you might look at these items. And if you plan to make one, let me know. We can collab on a video. I really tried finding something I liked in the women's clothing, but just couldn't get terribly inspired, and I apologize to 17th century women's fashions lover, but I think having the off-the-shoulder clothes of the gentry would just annoy me. For the couple of pieces based on women's clothing, I went middle class and more practical. And then I started looking at menswear. I mean, those Cavalier coats and all the fripperies men wore, culminating in the splendor of the Sun King. Now this I can work with. My 7 easy 17th century pieces is going to be a dress, a kirtle dress instead of a skirt. It's going to be linen, probably lightly boned. I'm going to make a pair of pantaloons or leggings instead of a pair of loose trousers. I'll make a jacket. Basically, I'm going to make a Cavalier coat with all of the bling. For the cashmere sweater, I'm going to sew up some knits with lace embellishments. For the white shirt, I'm going to make a short chemise, maybe a blend of a pirate shirt or chemise, but with less volume for a more flattering silhouette. And instead of a bodysuit, I'm going to make a tank top, sort of halfway between a pair of bodies and a sleeveless bodice. And then I'll make a lace partless and cuffs, because you cannot be Cavalier without all of the lace. Now coming up, this is going to be my favorite part of the process, because everything is possibility at this point. And I just put on an audiobook or Pandora and spend some lovely time sketching. Then I start sketching the garments, making several different versions of each one. Now is when I really start to narrow down what kind of garments I will be making for this 7-piece capsule wardrobe. I have some croquis that are plus size that I start to work with. Once I have a few options for each garment, then I can narrow down the final selection. I check the sketches to make sure they work with each other. Sometimes I play with paper dolls with the clothes to see how the pieces go together. Then I start to do the technical drawing. I use a plus size technical croquis that I purchased from Zoe Hong, and I make technical drawings with precise lines, well estimated seams and details. This stage is really important to me, as it makes me consider all of the details. And that will help make the construction phase much easier if I think through it at this point. And then I need to estimate the yardage. Sometimes I look at commercial patterns of a similar type of clothing. This gives me a starting point. I try to add a quarter to a half a yard to have a little bit of wiggle room, more if there is a pattern to match. Then I evaluate notions and the supplies that I will need. I will likely use more modern sewing methods for this round of clothes, as I want to be able to complete the garment sometime in this century. So I make a note of all of the notions and yardage on my technical drawing. You know, at this point I don't want to be too rigid and keeping to the original plan going forward. Some of this is likely to change when I do my mock-ups, and we just need to adjust and adapt our designs. And really, you know, that's why we sew, to be unique and creative. Make good notes along your way on your technical drawing, and then when you are done, you can go back and do another rendering to capture all of the alterations from the original design. And then I get into the really fun part, which is choosing the fabrics and notions. I plan to start by shopping my stash and then add any fabric necessary. I might look at upcycling a men's dress shirt for the shirt and undershirt. I do have a length of lightweight white linen that I can use, but I'm hoping for something with more color. We'll see what I can find. I have a lovely length of chenille brocade that I plan to use for the tank top. I love the colors in it and can play with using purples and aubergines as contrast colors. I kind of have my eye on this lovely aubergine cotton velveteen for the coat. It's not terribly expensive, so I may need to splurge. For some reason, I'm really loving all the purples lately. And now this is, where I get into my sewing plans, and this is the money game. Figuring out how best to plan my project to complete them on time and within my budget. When you do this, it can be digital or paper, it can be planners, notebooks, it can be productivity software like Notion or Asana. I kind of like a semi-scrapbooking method, but I'm rarely consistent. I'm trying to improve that though. It really ends up being a hybrid methods with some things digital and some things analog. Last fall I started this notebook for my Forest Wanderer outfit. This I think will help me build a record of all of my makes as I do more and more sewing for myself and for my fellow squirrel brains out there. Remember, there's no wrong way to do this. We often find our notes spread across multiple journals and other storage mediums. This isn't wrong, it's just how our brains work. And then we can think about construction workflow. Which garment do I want to make first? Do I want to make the tank or the coat, the dress or the shirt? I think I want to make the tank top, the shirt, and the pants first, as they're more likely to get regular play in my clothing rotation, and they're fairly simple. And it's okay to get easy wins. Sometimes we need easy wins. I have to consider how much time things are going to take. One of the joys of having squirrel brain is time blindness, so I really have to compensate for that by figuring how much time I think something will take, and then I double that amount. I must give myself firm deadlines with milestones along the way, or I'm like to wander off looking at rainbows and never get anything done. Then I start thinking about how much hand sewing is there going to be. For these garments, I plan to limit how much hand sewing I'm going to do just for expedience sake. I have a lot of big time commitments right now, so I don't want to have something languishing while it's in the hand sewing queue. The tank top will be front laced and lined with a sturdy fabric, probably boned. There will be a mock-up and a cheap thrifted fabric, then I will cut into the fashion fabric. It will have 3 layers. There's going to be a fashion fabric, a firm fabric to kind of hold the shape, and then also a lining fabric. I'll use bias tape to finish the edges. I'm not sure how I'm going to lace it yet. I'm not real thrilled with that many hand-sewn buttonholes, as my hand-sewn buttonholes tend to be pretty garbage, and I really don't like metal eyelets, so that's a decision I'll need to be making soon. And so I go through this exercise with each garment until I have a firm idea of the direction I should be going. So next up in my workflow will be the drafting the patterns or draping the garments, making the mock-ups, and sewing all the things. And this should keep me busy and mostly out of trouble. Well, mostly. It could happen. So these wardrobe additions from the 17th century are going to be so much fun to work on. And once I complete a set of clothes, I'll do a lookbook video and we'll share a little bit more about, how I did the different things. And I will post process pics to the gram. If there's interest, I can also do some live sew-alongs in the Facebook group. Let me know if that is something you would like to see. It will also keep me honest and on track. I wanted to share with you that there are some really exciting changes coming to this channel in the near future. The channel name is going to change and I will have a whole new website and blog. Later this spring, I will be launching my first course to help fellow squirrel brains reset their sewing mojo and sew their own unique styles. Yay! To help me create this course and make it truly valuable, I'd really like to be able to interview y'all to learn what you want to learn about hurting your squirrel brain. There's a link in the description below to sign up for one of my 50 slots in the next few weeks. And as always, get vaxxed, stay safe, and I bid you joy.